this video, we will dive into the movie Frankenstein. We will discuss the storyline, summarize the plot, and explore the cast and characters. Additionally, we will cover the movie's production details and box office performance. Finally, we will provide reviews and share personal reactions. So, let's get started. There is this Canada same critics like to show around Judge Arrested should actually avoid realizing their dream project. Because whatever reality achieve will not only not match their dream, but it will disappoint whatever the audience is to which the dream is presented. Frankenstein is a breathtaking film, an exhilarating visit to the conventional wisdom about dream. The writer directors make something almost new, and definitely resents the trend. Out of a story we will thought we know well. That 21st century movie does so by keeping close to its 19th century sources. Not precisely close, Mary Shelley's novel was completely as of 1918, and the movie is set in 1857, which is several years after the author's own death. Placing the real security in the Victoria era grounded period, trapping more familiar to the contemporary viewer. One suppose it also allowed its visionary, at least the first scientist, Victor Frankenstein, to place electricity more fully at its is possible when animating his creature. While the Toro scenario is so thoroughly inspired by the original, the movie began near the novel's end. In the architect, creature and creation have been switching role of hunter and hunted, but the filmmaker spares out intel in way that make the movie not just scaring and frightening in the best horror tradition, but heartbreakingly poignant, explaining the humanity James Whale achieved for his classic 1930s Frankenstein's picture. Frankenstein and the Bride of the Frankenstein. Horror moments will recognize visual cues from Whale and from the Hammer Frankenstein's film too. But Toro does not lean too hard on his admiration for the cinematic believes in his story, telling and resolve to delve into the all of philosophical and spiritual implication. Physically mistreated by a human god who insists on completely obedient. Jacob, a gloomy but vulnerable creature, is born into abject misery. But once Victor Frankenstein's creation achieved not only science but illiteracy, his torture truly began. He wonders who he is and where he belongs. He conjures himself as a monster in a very specific sense, an eternal outsider, at home nowhere. Misunderstood and inspired by all Elordi is marvelous in conveying the monster's intelligence, sensitivity, and yes, inherent gentleness. A shot of him holding and butchering a mouse, he is quietly wrecking. But he put across the power and rage beautifully. As well, Oscar S.S. Victor has a manic quality. Of course, he is not just consumed with his specific quest but obsessed with sealing his peers and his family on the rightness. Ordinary it is not apply when you are talking internal life. This is why Shelley subtitled her novel or A Modern Prometheus. Victor believes he is creating an ultimate good. It sucks sometimes step over a line and injures conventional mad scientist. Taro try but never descend into the camp. You understand what drives him while never quite relating to it, which is the should be Garrison's Welters. Turns in his most genuinely sympathetic performances as a mentor with the hidden movie. And Mia God lives up to her name as a finance of the Victor's nephew, who turned out to share some of the morbid preoccupations of the her possibly future-in-law. Del Toro's sense of the design executed by his Cracker Jack production and the Consume people, including regular collaborator Tamara Deverell and Katie, constantly hits you with the surprising hit of visual. Frankenstein is a cut of creation whose torso look like a group of the merged tectonic plate with a dress that the gods Elizabeth wear, feature little green island pressing up against one another. The frames are replete with the Del Toro's beloved red and black. One of Victor's dream figure is a winged Christmas angel, or it is a demon. resulting in a visual nightmare. One can soon in the Alexandre Desplat score is appropriately insistent. Years ago, Del Toro told me film journalist Alexandre Desplat, I dream I can make the greatest fiction ever, but then if you make it, you will may have made it. Whether it's great or not, it's done, you cannot dream about it anymore. There's a tragedy of filmmaker Del Toro should rest assured. This is a triumph, not a tragedy, and one can always dream again. This review was filmed from the world premiere at the Venice Film Festival on August 31. It opens theatrically on October 17 and on Netflix is November 7. The New Frankenstein is the most Del Toro movie ever, from its majestic gothic splendor to the monster's tragic beauty. If you have paid any attention at all to the Oscar-winning director and his films over the year, it appears in his jam, his guest over the interview, and his work so deciphered says out of the future rated R. After the death of his mother at a young age, Victor Frankenstein is determined to create life as an adult. In morally questionable way, he gets fired from his university gig. Jeff ran on things like attempting to rename corpses, but Victor gets financial backing for his experiment from arms dealer Harris. Victor gets assorted body part from executed criminal, and they seize the soldier from the crime war to craft the perfect specimen to shoot lightning through and make himself a living man. Just when he does not think it's a worked, the creature is born an extremely tall mass of sin and musical who looks a bit like he just lurched off the page of an anatomy chart. Still, Victor is not totally pleased. He's got a major thing for Elizabeth, Snace, and the finals are the Victor's brother. And after the double how to this ego of her showing the creature care and the creature not being evolved as Victor would like. The scientist tries to burn him to crisp. Victor fails and he locks two in dynamic where one tries to kill and or fall the other for much of the latter half of the movie. Other folks also try to end the creature and it never goes well. The Frankenstein production's design is impossible. Victor's lab, for example, is epic in the grandeur, with an almost artistic sci-fi vibe, and unlike the many draft takes on the Doctor and his monster, our Jaya. Films with vivid color, as large as the movie does seem, from the scope of the movie's to the 2.5 hour runtime. They don't get many scenes together, but Isaac and Elordi and Forger and the son of Sod are exciting to watch as Victor and the creation's relationship change widely over the course of the Frankenstein. Isaac spends a good amount of time injured and disabled, but especially early on he lends definite pomposity to his scientist. He can be a jerk, yeah, he is a fun to watch in his over-the-top glory. While Isaac might be the title character, remember kids, Frankenstein is a scientist and not be monster. Elordi's sensational portrayal make the movie, after notoriety roles in the Basil and Stalban. The Australian actor takes a huge leap forward, and there are a bunch of the prosthetic and the makeup no create a nifty character arc. Like his dad, the creature gets to tell his story. He is rather equivalent. The games you can assume he is just going to grunt the whole time. As the empathetic heart of Del Toro's narrative, complex but innocent. The creature tries to human in a enhajam, while that treats him badly. That's the kind of movie that Del Toro does better than anyone. And Frankenstein might just be his greatest side hit, as an the electrifying monster power every bite of his soul into his gorgeous creation. Del Toro's been talking about it since his 1982 feature debut. He has been dreaming of it since 1971. When aged 7, he first saw Boris Samble's Pro Jamesville 1931 masterpieces, and how he's finally done it adapted Mary Shelley's incredible, influential 1818 Gothic novel. Beginning in the Arctic as the crew of a Spain frozen in an ice encounter, Victor Frankenstein and the wrecking creature Jacob Desplat pursued him to the end of the earth. We learned of the terrible preceding event Victor's colored upbringing under a disciplinarian father after the death of his beloved mother. When a ship is trapped in the Arctic Ocean, Captain finds an injured man named Baron Victor. They are attacked by a giant superhuman duck creature. Captain Anderson tries to shoot the creature dead, but it does not die. He returns to the attack Victor, but he is shot and ends up family frozen ocean. As a young boy, Victor Frankenstein is raised by an abusive father. Victor loses his mother, who dies while giving birth to his brother. William he blames the father for failing to save his mother and vows to find a way to be a better doctor than his father. Over the years, Victor started trying to find ways to resurrect the other using deep batteries or technology. One day, Victor meets a man named Harlander who agrees to find Victor's experiment and asks him to breathe life into a dead man using science. Victor starts making great progress in his attempt to his frost different organ and body part from several soldiers' dead bodies on the final leg of his experiment. Victor learns that he funds his experiment for a selfish reason, as he is dying and wants to be resurrected using Victor's technique. Dies while trying to stop Victor from wasting the resources of the dead body. Victor does not and continues with the experiment. The creature awakens and starts growing close to Victor, worried for his safety. Victor catches the creature in a dungeon. Elizabeth tries to empathize with the creature and calls out Victor for being harsh with him. Victor punishes the creature and hits him due to his developmental delay. Victor sends William and Elizabeth away and decided to burn the place down in an attempt to kill the creature. However, Victor loses his leg in the accident. The creature shows up on the ship to attack Victor, but Captain Anderson stops him. The creature tells Anderson that Victor gets to tell his story to the captain and start narrating his own story, revealing how he escaped the dungeon and made it out into the real world. After this, the creature started taking shelter in an empty house after being attacked by a bunch of hunters. After the family living in the house returned, the creature started growing fond of the house, a blind old man. The creature starts helping the family and learns but when the old man teaches his granddaughter how to read. One day the old man asks to stay behind while the family goes to hunt. In solitude, the creature reveals himself to the blind man. The blind man treats the creature with empathy and teaches him how to read several books, including the Bible. The creature wishes to learn the truth about his origin and goes back to the tower to look for Victor. The old man dies after being attacked by wolves in the creature's absence. Upset by this, the creature goes looking for Victor. On the night of William and Elizabeth's wedding, the creature finds Victor and asks for a companion. Victor refuses to repeat something that he already regrets. He tries to shoot the creature, but Elizabeth is shot trying to save him. The creature gets violent and he pushes everyone away. William is attacked in the process. The creature takes Elizabeth to the forest and the two talk as Elizabeth breathes her last. Meanwhile, William tells Victor that he is actually the monster, the name that he keeps calling the creature. Victor goes looking for the creature in the forest. After Elizabeth death, the creature goes violent and vows to torment Victor for the days he lives. The creature continues to attack Victor but never kills him. Victor is apologetic for his behavior and in his dying moment asks for the creature to forgive him. The creature forgives Victor as he dies and leaves with a kiss on Victor's forehead. Anderson projects the creature and he gets off the ship. The creature pushes the ship for the Arctic Ocean and Anderson tells the people abroad that are going home. The films end with the creature gazing toward the sunset as tears flow from his eyes. After sitting through the 2 hour and 32 minutes Netflix original film as well as 45 minutes long behind the scene footage that is simultaneously releases on the platform, we have quite a few things to unfold about Frankenstein. The story is a play-by-play retelling on Mary Shelley classic Gothic novel of the same name and ends on a very monotone note. We have no idea what happened to the creature. We do know he forgives the creature, Victor, who meets he is faithful, and however, there is no real end of the creature. Does he live on forever? Does he find a partner to call his own, even if it is for a few years? The film shows Victor as a young boy who craves his father's love. Instead of catching a child through the process of the reproduction, Victor creates a creature to prove his father wrong. The creature has no end, unlike human. Ironically, the creature whom Victor calls a monster is anything but that, similar to the way Victor's father abuses and backlied him as a child. Victor continues the cycle of abuse and trauma with a childlike creature. Through the film, we see two sets of father-son relationship. We see how Victor is treated by his father, which is similar to how they treat him creature. At the same time, we also see how Victor's father treat William, which is similar to how the old man treat the creature. The film does an amazing job capturing the complexities of human emotion. Love, anger, companionship, hate, forgiveness, crafted brilliantly by Del Toro. The story follows Victor Frankenstein, who is driven by a desire to conquer death. In his quest, he creates a sentient being by assembling. Reader of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein or the modern naughty pop culture image of Frankenstein and his monster is not especially faithful to Shelley's novel. The creature was played by the Boris Karloff's Frank Bell, famous 1931. Film adaptation was grueling, slow, and childlike. Not the eloquent, tragic villain who Shelley wrote. When Del Toro's Frankenstein was announced in 2023, I expected a close adaptation of the novel. After all, Del Toro is devoted to Shelley, and how could we resist the temptation to finally adopt Frankenstein correctly? I was right and wrong. Del Toro's Frankenstein has a novel broad structure, but the detail within the dead old line are rearranged. Some characters or story beats are cut away, while others are added or refined. Check how the movie uses the framing devices, which many other films exercise, where Vector is hunting his creation through the architect. Frozen and near that, Victor tells his tale to an ambitious sea captain explorer, Carl Robert Walton in the novel and Anderson in the film, where he is played by the Lars Michelson. In the novel, the creatures tell his post-abandonment host to Victor, which Victor then recounts to Walton, a story within a story. The film instead has a creatures take over as narrator of these framing devices halfway through, splitting itself between the Victor's tale and John the creature. It's a collective change giving the creature's story an emotions equal weight as he is a creature, rather than these changes leaving me annoyed by another unfaithful adaptations. They made me like Del Toro's Frankenstein more. I found Can It 1994 film Mary creativity and passion. To be clear, I don't think these changes make Del Toro's Frankenstein superior to the novel, but the filmmaking changes and what it changes are a testament to Del Toro's artistry. Even when he is adapting a story as close to his heart as this one, Sad Heart is where it follows. Del Toro wrote a foreword for 2017 the new announced Terry Frankenstein, reprinting Charlie's text within the exhaustive research from Les Klinger. In the foreword, you can read how Del Toro interpreted Frankenstein, what most resonated with him, and the series of the movie that he is now released into the world. He opened the foreword declaring, all out his self-portraiture, reading that, I felt foolish expecting he could not change the novel. What merit is there is on tracing a portrait of someone else. Frankenstein has been retold so often that there is no true version of it anymore either. Shelley herself revised the book in 1831, 13 years after his original 1818 edition. So you can't even point to single source text as correct. Del Toro first saw the James Whale and the Boris Karloff Frankenstein movies and bring that early love into his movie. The way of movies as a creature. His infantile beginning and his slow learning. Echo Karloff's black hair and sad faces are closer to the creature, as drawn in the comic artist Barney. illustrated the edition of the Frankenstein. In the novel, Victor eludes how he created life so no one can recreate his experiment. The film takes after the wheels and shows Victor him hunting lightning to animate his creation. Frankenstein cuts out the Victor's best friend, and he is clever but adds in a Harlander, a mentor who resembles Dr. Stamjum's Praetorius from Hail Bride of the Frankenstein. Harlander Victor to discover a new world of gods and monsters. While the book unfolds in the 1917 that moves his Frankenstein up to the 1850. Why this is super famous change? I think it's to facilitate the inclusion of early photography in the film. Early cinemas presence in differences. Ford always Victor built the creature. Harlander takes photos of which he creature himself, later finds in the ruins of the lab. If photos capture the soul, then his probably creature does have one. Victor's experiment unfolds while the Slayman war happened in the far off land. Dr. Frankenstein is often portrayed as a grave robber, and here he takes the corpses of soldiers fallen in battle. One character wise enough to see the folly of Varis Elizabeth in his new annotated Frankenstein. Forward Del Toro, right of Shelley, as a woman, he the Fatam, who searched for meaning in world ruled by man. He treats Elizabeth in the Shelley's own image, and that of own heroine added from Kisman Peak. In the novel, Elizabeth is a girl taken in by Victor's family, either his cousin or an orphan. Depending on the edition, and all but raised to be his wife, she has little agency or depth. She professes her love for Victor and represents a better future which he forsakes for his experiment, and which is then finally stolen away from him by creatures vegans. Elizabeth in Del Toro's Frankenstein is not Victor fantasy, but his brother Williams as well as the Hollander's niece. She is a pure-hearted but also a misfit, preferring to read about the insect rather than the romance. In a search for something purer, Elizabeth finds the creatures offering him a mother's touch unlike Victor's paternalism. She senses Victor's cruelty, and so despite a brief courtship, she spurns him. He does not love Elizabeth. He covers her especially since he resembles his late mother, also played by Goth. Much has already been written about how Dell turns Victor into a more malicious character, whose self-pity makes him spiteful, where in the novel he was merely naive and irresponsible. As William dies, he tells Victor he is a monster. Compare this to Kircher's solo companion. Readers of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein or the modern naughty pop culture image of Frankenstein and his monster is not especially faithful to Shelley's novel. The creature, as played by the Boris Karloff in Frank, Wales' famous 1931 film adaptations, was grueling. When Del Toro's Frankenstein was announced in 23, I expected a close adaptation of the novel. After all, Del Toro is a devotee of Shelley, and how could he resist the temptation to finally adopt Frankenstein correctly? I was right and wrong. Del Toro's Frankenstein has the novel's broad structure, but a detail within that outline are rearranged, some character or story beat are cut away, while others are added or reframed. Check how the movie uses the framing devices, which many other films exercise, where Vector is hunting his creation, so the architect, frozen and near death. Victor tells his hero an ambitious sea captain explorer, called Robert Welton in the novel and Anderson the film, where he is played by Lars Michelson. In the novel, the creature tells his forced abandonment was to Victor, which Victor then recounts to Walton's a story within a story. The film instead has the creature take over as a narrator of this framing devices halfway through, separating itself between the Victor's tale and them. The creature tale is a collective change giving the creature's story and emotion equal weight as his creator. Rather than these changes leaving me annoyed by another unfaithful adaptations, they made me like Del Toro's Frankenstein more. I find Kenneth Branagh 1994 film Mary Shelley's Frankenstein a bore because it largely just recreated the novel, This Frankenstein feels well alive with the creativity and passion. To be clear, I don't think the changes make Del Toro's Frankenstein superior to the novel, but the filmmaking changes and what it changes are a testament to Del Toro's artistry. Even when he is adapting a story as close to his heart as his once sad heart is what is followed. Frankenstein has been retold so often that there is no true version of it anymore either. Shelley herself revised the book in 1831, 13 years after its original 1818 edition, so you can't even find a single course tagged as a correct. Del Toro first saw the James Whale and the Boris Karloff Frankenstein movie, and he bring that early love into his movie. The way moves as the creature. He is infantile beginner and he is slow learning. Echo Karloff's black hair and sad face are closer to the creature as drawn in comic artist Benin, illustrated edition of the Frankenstein. In the novel, Victor did this how he created life so no one can recreate his experiment. The film takes after he fails and shows Victor harnessing lightning to animate his creation. Frankenstein cuts out Victor's best friend, Henry, but adds in Heinrich Erlanger, a mentor who resembles Dr. Symptoms, Patrios from Wales but of the Frankenstein. Like Patrios, Erlanger pushes Victor to discover a new world of gods and the monster. While the book unfolds in 1790, Del Toro moves his Frankenstein up to the 1850. Why does he super values change? I think it's to facilitate the inclusion of early photography in the film. In Allergy Sanma Prasanna in Fancy Fort, as Victor built the creature. Erlanger takes photos of it, which the creature himself later finds in the ruin of the lab. A photo captured the soul. Then he proves his creature does have one. Victor's experiment unfolds while the Carrimon War happens in his far lands. Dr. Frankenstein is often portrayed as a grave robber, and here he takes the corpses of soldiers fallen in battle. One character wise enough to see the folly of war is Elizabeth in his new and noted Frankenstein. Forward Del Toro writes of Shelley as a woman ahead of her time who searched of meaning in a world ruled by man. He tweaks Elizabeth in Shelley's own image and that of his own heroine Edith Cushing from Carrison Peak. In the novel, Elizabeth is a girl taken in by Victor's family, either his cousin or an orphan depending on the edition, and all but raised to be his wife. She has little agency or depth. She professes her love for Victor and represents a better future, which he forsakes for his experiment, and which he is then finally stolen away from him by the creature's vegans. Elizabeth is Del Toro's Frankenstein, is not Victor's fancy, but his brother William's as well as the Hollander's niece. She is a pure-hearted but also a misfit, preferring to read about the insect rather than the romance. In her search for something purer, Elizabeth finds the creatures offering him a mother's touch unlike Victor's fatalism. She senses Victor's cruelty, and so despite a brief courtship, she spurns him. He does not love Elizabeth, he covered his especially since he resembles his late mother, also played by Goth. Much has already been written about how Del Toro turned Victor into a more malicious character. Whose self-pity make him spiteful, where in the novel he was merely naive and responsible. As William dies, he tells Victor he is a monster compared to the creature's solo companion. Yet I think Del Toro is notably unsympathetic to Victor. Shelley's Victor Frankenstein had a happy childhood with loving parent. His childhood fascination, which Archimedes overtook his curiosity and he wrote his own doom. Here Victor is a brooding child with a demanding and physically abusive father. Del Toro loves outsider and he makes Victor into one too. Victor Mohammed was the sole light of his life, but that light was suffered out when she died in childbirth. Victor's interest in the alchemy goes unmentioned while he moves as a motive variant. He sees as angel statue, colored in red and wrapped in flames, promising him he will be cure life and death. With how now the quest ends for Victor. You feel the angel appearing before Victor was not Saint Michael but the sworn adversary. At a university lecture where Victor presents his early finding, he preaches the virtue of defense. Preferred artillery and his moves often display disobedience as an act of courage. Victor laments that after the creature is born, he has reached the horizon of his ambitions. Perhaps Del Toro felt the same with the Frankenstein. Gothic horror influences have replied to in country work since the Mexican fantasy burst onto the scene at the Chronos. The Davis backbone and the Roger director's encounter with Mary Shelley's immortal 1880 novel has been a long time coming, and after too many screen adaptations to list, it feels like a lightning charged act of the revelation. The genre defying the craftsman's sometimes detailing the Frankenstein's honor the essence of the book in that it not so much the trade of horror as tragedy, romance, and a philosophical reflection on what it means to be the human. Absent or imperfect fathers have been a recurring theme in Del Toro's film, given affecting the treatment here in the organized relationship between the scientist Victor Frankenstein and the unarmed creature he brings to life out of space together and apart. Those roles are played respectively by Oscar Isaac, with the very intensity of a tortured artist. The setting organically consumed by the remorse, and Jacob in a relatively performance, notable for his expressivity, physicality, but perhaps even more so for his innocence. In addition to its emotional forces, Del Toro's Frankenstein is a film for heady sensorial pleasure. The director's celebrated visual imagination channeled through exceptional work from returning collaborators, including the cinematographer Dan Leston, production designer Charmer Darrell, and costume designer Katie Hallery. Especially the overstretched red and green that scorches shadow is breathtaking. Meanwhile, the eerie message by a music area is the core that among Alexandre Desplat's most ravishing work. Broken down into a prelude and two parts whose perspective is evident from the title. Victor sails and creature sail. The story begins in the Arctic where a Danish sea oversees the attempt of his crew to dig their ship out of ice. Investigating a fire gleam post across the tundra, they come up Isaac's Victor injured and near death. The rampaging creatures appear almost as a giant, are towering hooded from wrapped in animal fur. Victor bring him to me. He growled, tossing aside crew member. They assail him and shoot at him, and using his mighty satires to dirty ship. When a blunderous blast fell the monster, and he falls through cracks into the icy water. The captain assumes their foe dead, but Victor assures him that the creature cannot die and will come back. He begged it down to leave him out on the ice and let it take him. Victor tells his story to the captain, starting with his childhood on a grand family plantation estate that has since been lost. His first mother was he interviewed until she died, giving birth to her second son. That lived young Victor Keddystone at the mercy of his cold. Charlie's agents are distinguished British doctor, whom he suspects of receiving his infant brother at the cost of his mother's life. The action jumps forward to find Victor in 1855 addressing the Royal College of the Medicine, demonstrating his early success eliminating that issue. The bewitched medical establishment scoff at the notion of him taking command over the force's life and death, but for reasons beyond the scientific interest that later become clear. Wealthy arms merchant Harlanders is intrigued enough to finds Victor's ongoing research and experimentation. Around this time, Victor's golden child younger brother, William, resurfaces his new engaged to Mary niece Elizabeth, whose sharp intellect and scientific Curiosity, intensity, captive Victor. Gothi's entrance is a stunning peacock, blue gown, and feathers headdress. Gives her appearance of an otherworldly creature itself. It is the first of several look of the Elizabeth, fashioned by the costumer Hawley. A moss green velvet outfit and a bejeweled white wedding dress among gem that point itself possess beauty, as a figure out of a fairy tale. While Gordy's screen of horror crown is well established that Toro appear to have seen something more in actress of fortunate intelligence, spirit, and the strength that fortify her character's porcelain delicacy. Elizabeth's embarrassed of the colors, alcohol, and eye-popping earlier image of Victor's mother, sweated in the blood red with a long veil billowing in the wind. It also marks her as a maverick free thinker. There are new jaw-dropping the visual throughout. One of the most striking of them is a huge laboratory built for Victor in the remote castle in coastal Scotland. Physical construction built from scratch, like the dinosaur or composite of the existing structure, not rigid fabrication, taking their cue from the classic mad scientist lab while elevating the setting with a kind of the atmospheric detail for which the Toro is formed. The designer equipped the space with a silver lightning rod conductor attached to an external tower, steam engine, and a massive vertical conveyor cylinder the Latin inscription across this building's facade. Aquasat Vita is appropriate for an experiment born out of a thunderstorm. Victor initially selects a suitable body part from condemned men just prior to them being hanged, but with the crewmen were escalating the battlefield provide a vast assortment of the mutilated captives with plenty of strong, long-limbed men that require, rather than just a head stitched to a body and rewired with a new brain. Victor's creatures look like a ceramic paintings had attached to the patchwork, marble sculpted clotted only in loincloth of bandage. The Rangi Elordi inhabit Miles Hill, creature designed with a bewildering mix of awakens and grace, but just as notably a sensibility that recalled the erotic charge del Toro and Hill gave the ambitious fishman in shape of the water. There is a heart rending the vulnerability to the creature from his earliest appearance, the lighting like a baby in your discoveries like water or leaves. Victor kept him the client in a large holding area for safety of both creature and creation. When Elizabeth discovered him as if drawn by instinct, he is encanted by her eternal presence while she seemed to insult him, creature's innate humanity. But it soon emerges that Victor had not given much thought to what would happen beyond creation. It cuts through his confidence when William quanted, did you ever ask yourself, of all the parts that make up that man, which part holds her soul? Del Toro acknowledges them. Ray's 1931 masterpiece of the same title as a formative influences, and his version draw also from its arguably even better equal 1935 praise of the Frankenstein. That becomes apparent in the creature's tale. When he escapes his castle and finds shelter in an isolated farmhouse with a blind old man, wonderfully overjoyed to have the companionship. One of the film's most of the touching moment is a creature learning the word friend. That's just the beginning of his education, with books opening up a whole world of language and knowledge. The great sorrow of the story is the incompanionship between the father and son, but a creature's shattering experience of loss is what takes the photos to another level. The disillusion that equals him when he is discovered through Victor's notebook that he is a wretch assembled from the refuse and discard of that is worsened by the realization that absolute that will remain elusive to him, denying him a remedy for his pain. When Hunter shot him down at his point, his inner thought emerged as a searing internal tournament that was silenced again and John Marceli's life. The quiet from Brown with which Dal John closes the film, and as he heart will break and get brokenly live on clearly indicate the director's vision of the Frankenstein as an operatically romantic tragedy. I cannot die and I cannot live alone. The creature tells Victor during a fateful confrontation. Elordi's dark, soulful eye convey a piercing sadness not felt from this character since Boric's haunted work in the whale film, which made him one of the screen forefather of the palatable monster. There is complexity also in the emotional range of Isaac's training performances as Victor, a traumatized son who is attempting to play God, fathers his own traumatized son in the lab. The fall from grace of this visionary genius, devastated by the ramification of what he has done, is a tragedy no less mournful than the creature. One of their finest, this is an epic skill, storytelling of the uncommon beauty, feeling, and artistry. While Netflix is giving his visual feast just a 3 week theatrical run ahead of a streaming debut, it begs to be the experience on the big screen. And the opportunity to get lost in another Del Toro's world is a good one. Frank said no Netflix is the singular filmmaker's long gestating dream project, and in many ways. His adaptations, Mary Shelley's indelible 19th century novel, is a culmination of the recurring theme. Del Toro's Frankenstein starring Oscar Isaac, Jacob Elordi, and Mia Goth premieres on Netflix on Friday. How is the film being received by Rotten Tomatoes critics? Frankenstein held his world premiere at the 2025 Venice International Film Festival on August 30 before opening in the limited release in theater in New York and Los Angeles on October 17. The film next expanded on theaters nationwide on October 24. The log line for Frankenstein's read. Oscar-winning director Del Toro adapted Mary Shelley's classic tale of Victor Frankenstein, a brilliant but egotistical scientist who brings a creature to life in a monstrous experiment that ultimately leads to the undoing of both the creature and his tragic creation. Directed by Del Toro's Frankenstein also stars Iscamer Lars Michelson and Charlie Dance. Reviews for Frankenstein broke after the Venice premiere, and Rotten Tomatoes critics initially gave the film a 79% fresh rating based on the 19 review. Nearly 250 reviews have seen followed in the thanks to the film's theatrical release, and as a result, Frankenstein's critics think are improved. As of the publications of this article, Frankenstein critics rating on RT has increased 85%, fresh based on the 267 review. The RT critics consensus of the film read, finding the humanity is one of cinema's most iconic monsters. Del Toro's Frankenstein is a living epic that gets its most invigorating walls of a Jacob Elordi standout performances. In addition, Frankenstein has earned a 95% fresh popcorn meter score based on the 1000 plus verified user rating. The RT honest summary read, with his legendary visual touch, Del Toro described Frankenstein as a modern that's gloriously gothic and heartbreaking. Today is among the top critics on RT, who gives the Frankenstein a fresh rating. Writing the Del Toro is a review summary. Frankenstein might just be his greatest hit, as an electrifying monster power every bite of his soul into his gorgeous creation. Audrey Henderson of the Boston Globe also gives the Frankenstein is a fresh review on RT writing. This is a horror movie, but it's also a heartbreaking tale of forced existence and the subsequent quest of answer. And it's one of the year's best movie. Also praising Del Toro's filmmaking sensibilities, is Glenn Walton of the NPR, who writes in his RT review summary. While the film captures the tone and the spirit of the original novel, in all its breathless zeal and high me to John Fanatic coach direction. Leonardo Martin of the Leonard's Martin Com also gave Frank scenes a fresh review on Archie, and along with it the highest of compliment. Writing James Whale's 1931 Frankenstein remains a classic it has always been, but Del Toro's Frankenstein deserved to be absorbed and celebrated right alongside it. This is a movie he was born to make. Among the top critics on RT who give Frankenstein a rotten rating is the equivalency Australia's Century Morning Herald who wrote, while the film captured the tone and spirit of the original novel in all the breathless zeal and high me to John Fanting Couch. The many narrative tweakers that Toro has made ensure that you would never mistake his Frank scenes for anyone else's. Justin Chang of New York also gives the film's a rotten review on RT writing, just as Victor C. Harlander found it. Nikki Gables out of Australian is not a fan of film, either writing in her rotten review, summary on RT. Del Toro's Frankenstein is as overlaying, relentlessly violent and intelligent mashup of the original. It takes the bare bones of the Shelley story and cures its clean clarity. Harry Hurts the Globe and the Mail also give Frankenstein a rotten review on RT but does have a bite of praise for it as well writing. This is a magnificent, no expense spread filmmaking. Yet when it comes to the actual story and its grand idea, Del Toro's Frankenstein lumbers along the barely a jolt of the necessary electricity. Victor Frankenstein was no doctor. He was college dropout for not for age from UNG Chapel his student body. When I heard that there was going to be a no forensic movie, one reportedly due to the source material, I was so excited to see an accurate depiction of Victor Frankenstein. However, as I would come to find out, Victor's age and education were just two of the many aspects of the novel that were changed for the sake of the movie. Victor was not the only character altered, as his younger brother William Felix, depicted as a child in the novel, is a grown adult in the film. On top of this, William is engaged to the Elizabeth in on-screen adaptations despite her being Victor's wife in the novel. William, whose purpose in the novel is to be tragically murdered at a young age, does not fit his role in the film as a mature adult. He is lying word to Victor. You were the monster hold almost overweight, as there was barely any development of the relationship on screen. Elizabeth also has an uncle who dies of his syphilis and horror into the film, and this is barely acknowledged her new role, as William's finance felt out. Their interaction were awkward for a spouse love much. Throughout the movie, Elizabeth is one of the few people who genuinely treat the creature's Jacob, showing him compassion and patience. I actually enjoyed the change as it explored a side of Elizabeth that seemed genuine to her original character as a unpensioned young woman. However, in an unelastic scene, Victor shot her after barely being spooked and 10. As he does, she expressed her romantic feeling to the creature, throwing off the mortal relationship they had up until the point. Elizabeth had so much pointed, but it feels like it was going to be waste. Her death felt pointless. While I love Goth's performances in The Pearl and X, I don't think she was a good fit for Elizabeth. She mumbled many of her lines, a character trait that worked well in the other movie, but not this one, and had a distantity, southern accent that stuck out like a score thumb. While I disliked the initial animalistic representation of the Elordi's creature, his performances embodied the character's human-like vulnerability seeming larger than he felt thanks to Elordi's 5'4" to 5 height. The creature's memorism and body language. Frankenstein by Mary Shelley is one of the most beloved horror movies ever written. Oscar-winning directors explore the human condition in Frankenstein 2025. A bold reimagining of the Mary Shelley's 1818 Gothic novel of the same name. Del Toro's earliest affection for monsters has defined his renowned career. He constantly seeks to find beauty in darkness and the unknown. His second only Frankenstein is profoundly heartfelt and sentimental, which is no small feat given how many times Shelley's novel has been adapted for the big screen. The Mexican Arturo discovered new life in one of the cinema's most iconic monsters in an empathetic and endlessly fascinating way. Frankenstein's began in 1875 with Captain Anderson, Lars Michelson, as the Danish Navy fleet struggle with the icy element enough Earth has not. Here he stumbles upon a severely injured Victor Frankenstein, but the maid doctor is not alone. Victor is being chased by the seemingly vicious, Lordshman-like creature who attacked the soldier on board. The Danish captain and his crew manage to incapacitate the beast for the time being. However, Victor warns him with his return and stop at nothing to kill him. This is where Del Toro's film adaptations truly start, as the first chapter began, telling Dr. Victor Frankenstein's origin to a flashback. Odysseus learned about his unstoppable obsession with creating life from death. The egotistical scientist experiment are seen as cute and wild by his peer. Reimaginating a couple together, zombie-like body evoke a visceral reaction. It's not until Harlander's Christopher, a wealthy arm manufacturer, walk into the picture that Victor's life is changed. Inspired by his ghastly ambitions, Harlander promises the Doctor infinite resources to complete his mission of creating a living from his raw flesh of the deceased. Just like his source material, Frankenstein explored him of life and creation. Victor's obsession is driven by the passing of beloved mother. Clay Frankenstein's having that when giving birth to his younger brother, William flags the sudden loss of his mother in a personal tragedy that speaks Victor's descent into madness as he strives to conquer death. Flashes of the imposing angels in Goth in flames and a vibrant gore, often accompanied by the Alexandre Desplat a catching score, are led to tell Toro's hunting yet gorgeous blend of darkness and light. One particular moment stands out as Victor chooses the perfect body part on battlefield of corns before methodically dismembering them for his greatest experiment. While the gorgeous visuals are undeniably unraveling, as a titular demanded surgeon goes to work. Despite his adventures almost whimsical score plays in contrast. Cinematographer Dan Loster, continuing his marvelous streak of the collaborator with Del Toro after the Christmas break, strategically utilized light and shadows to create utterly mesmerizing image. The most unforgettable of this scene is when the creature hold Elizabeth Lemon's William C. Finance in her wedding dress, stained in blood. Similarly, a shot of Claire's pale corpse, surrounded by red crosses in her coffin, as white snowfall, offers a chilling contrast to Victor's perspective of purity. This painterly motif showcases I as Laston's and Del Toro's keen understanding of Gothic tradition. The camera is constantly moving, sweeping through each breathtaking location with fluid grace. It feels like the viewer is drifting through Del Toro westward, wherein dust, symptoms, costume, and lavish production design play an essential role. It feels like the viewer is drifting through Del Toro's westward, wherein dust, symptoms, costume, and lavish production design play an essential role. Every set piece is steeped in the historical detail. from the wedged stone wall of Victor's laboratory to the rich textile of the 19th century clothing. The film's color palette, dominated by the green and the glowing oranges, bring the story to life with an otherworldly quality. This is paired with the astounding on-actor Jacob. Frankstein's monster look constantly incredible from scene to scene. No surprise given Del Toro's long history is makeup perfect. Victor Frankenstein's tower, a crumbling structure filled with a rock stuck secret, hint at the pending doom of his monster's experiment. Its architecture and the surrounding landscape are reminiscent of the aforementioned crimsons. Frankenstein touches on obedience and defense, which are recurring the narrative theme in Del Toro's movie. Victor pushes science in this very limit, defying what was once thought to be the possible. Yet his tragic creation is a testament to his genius, but also his sheer hubris. The creature is a hell prisoner, enchained by Victor due to fear of the outside world, both those that would harm his scientific achievement and reputation. Lamentably, Victor sees his experiment as a need rather than a person. But after much dehumanization, the monster outdefies his master and seeks to destroy him, breaking free of his iron shackle as he takes control of his destiny. Oscar Isaac Moon Knight inside portrays Victor with an erratic touch, emphasizing his dual brilliance and the arrogance as he refuses to see his creation as anything more than a freak of the nature. Isaac later films it is Jacob Elordi's performances that steals the show even in prosophoristic. The star is initially unrecognizable as a frightening monster who furiously hunts his creator. However, Elordi's face becomes easier to see as the newborn creature becomes more human. Unsurprisingly, Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein is quite a tearjerker. One of most poignant period in the movie began as the monster experiences peace for the first time in his existence. Leaving the harmoniously behind the wall of family home, he is soon welcomed by an old, wise blind man David who teaches him about life, literature and the world beyond Frankenstein creature. Now learning about Adam and Eve, and reading poetry like the by Percy Shelley became a legend. Sadly, this place is fleeting as the monster soon learns that sad truth about his creation. With this case, he becomes enraged with the controllable fury for his creature's choice to give him full life by creating him. Victor has unknowingly sentenced him to immortality, denying him the core human component of that, which pushes the monster to violence. David Bradley is nice surprises here as character. Connection to the monster proved a man can live alongside such a beast. Likewise, Mia Goth has a small but impactful role as Elizabeth. Home Vector is an armed with despite son being wed to his brother. As with the blind man, Elizabeth instantly formed a connection to the monster, empathizing with him to a degree that no one else can. Given their unique circumstance, the film's ending, a bittersweet, carries a message of hope. Del Toro's script has later fared for shared adaptation from the original novel, but ultimately captured the spirit and essence of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein's, viewing it as more wholehearted and compassionate than previous movie adaptations. There is a scene of clear, yet the journey ahead is uncertain. This resolution will feel somewhat unearned for some, since there is only a brief pursuit between the victor and his monster. Regardless of the plot and focusing on that aspect as much, Del Toro still make the viewer deeply care for his message. The monster's devastating journey, just like the myth of the, is one of the suffering and the knowledge, and endless search for the acceptance and love. In the end, the monsters believe that, like the sun, life will rise again. Perhaps he can find a place in this new world. Filmmaker Del Toro has done it again. His made movies just reflect on the imperfection and malformations of life in the transfixing and inspiring or to the Mary Shelley's classic tale. Becoming a Frankenstein's evangelist was not on my 2025 bingo. It started with my classic book club every year. We read a Gothic drum to the coincide with the autumn, and our very first pick was Mary Shelley's classic tale. In the 3 years since, I have read it twice and am always amazed at how moved I am. Today, Del Toro's cinematic adaptations of Netflix's. What better way to start my Friday morning than with I can say in the Jaka better pick up a few about this season. As I have previously started, I am much more of a reader than a watcher. So when I do turn to the screen, it's often because a pretty costume caught my eye. So first measure to the costume designer, because everything was a Victorian face for the year. Vibrant, almost violent jewel tones and symptoms, gowns made for some very captivating still. I have also the unabashedly paint almost every Mia got outfit to a Pinterest board. Okay, now on to the real meat and potatoes. Or should I say bones? If you are unfamiliar with the framework of this story, here is my book review for a quick fresher. Read that and come back. The film takes gross liberties from the original text, but in the cinematic context it works well. Everything you think you know about the Frankenstein's monster is going to be returned on its head. Ultimately, both the movie and book are a story of the creator and his creator. I was not predisposed to the like Victor Frankenstein in the first place. The book painted him as a mopey, nervous victim, but whoa, Del Toro's adaptations made me hate him. Props to Oscar Isaac for animating this two-faced character. Was who never afraid to pretend goodness when it suited him, but was unhesitating on his cruelty. Watching the performance taught not to be a cringy way. Uncomfortable in a you are doing something morally disgusting and how can you live with yourself kind of. Despite being human, Frankenstein denies humanity to his creation, to all the films he don't. He dares, he abuses his blame. He also put it best. So simple but pure. I almost shed a tear. I am a sense to you, but just myself, I simply am. Repeatedly, Frankenstein hid behind his own pride and cowardice to protect his selfishness while I am not one of the condemn violence. Even I felt to abide of dedications when the monster broke Frankenstein's nose. What pleasantly shocked me was the tenderness which Elordi rendered Frankenstein's creature. Aside from the voiceover narration, the creature speaks very little until about the second half of the film. Think of him as a body learning to speak, because essentially that's what's happening. Has such nods, facial expression, and tones of voice, a way of moving his towering 6'5" frame to feel like a dumb child that from the get-go. I was taken by the monster's innocence. Del Toro's script did one excellent job of exploring the humanity of the creature as he moves in the world, grappling with the love, loneliness, grief, even forgiveness, the starkness between the man who was a monster and monster who was the real man is brought into the full light in their final act. Frankenstein's evil itself asks the monster to accord him one final wish. The creature, being the goodness that he is, granted willingly before the film and with one of the most touchingly closing scene. Setting is the humanly beautiful score by Alexandre Desplat plot. Frankenstein is a movie that, while so violent it had me, at overrating my gaze, is also one that forces me to hope. If it does not scoop up at least one award, I will like the monster the gratuitously throwing some hand. The story of Frankenstein has been around since 1818. That since that there have been several adaptations of the horror classic. It follows a scientist named Victor Frankenstein who gets fascinated by that and he decided to conquer it. Using all his knowledge, he creates a creature from the lifetime bodies, however. As soon as the creatures awaken, Victor abandons him because he does not want to take responsibility for his action. Over the years, the story has captivated a massive fandom, and one among those die-hard forward Del Toro. The filmmakers said it a hundred times that Frank's story had been his childhood love and would like to make project. He had wanted to make the movie for several decades, but every time he approached a production house, he was left disappointed because no one would take the risk. However, Netflix finally agreed and went on to create his masterpiece under Del Toro's direction. You might agree that the changes made in the new Frankenstein film fit perfectly into the universe created centuries ago because it came from the someone who loved the original story since childhood. The 1880 novel and the films portray the creature as more monsters and indirectly. Those who have read the novel already know that after being abandoned by his creature, the monster decided to take revenge, so it ended up killing someone really close to Victor. Yes, we are talking about Elizabeth, who was Dr. Frank's finance in the book. Unlike 2025, the love angel between the Elizabeth and Victor was an integral part of the Mary Shelley story. However, Del Toro is differently making the Elizabeth Victor's sister-in-law. He also cleverly showcased Victor's feeling toward her, but she let him down after realizing what kind of man he was. Even Elizabeth initially loved William. After meeting the monster, she devoted feeling for him. These changes were not minor, so if not executed properly, they would have caused a blunder. So Del Toro indeed came with a new light and illuminated the entire film community with his vision. While I have no complaint from the supporting cast, I would also say that it's the lead duo who carry the story of the film on Jay Soldier. I have been an Oscar Isaac fan since more than once in sense the characters accused the mad doctor of being the true monster. Not to be confused with the Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. Even this is latest adaptations he was closer to the author's intentions than any previous version put to screen. What is a film? The actor if not a man who plays God, and who among their circle identifies more with monsters than Mr. Del Toro. The visionary Mexican director who started his career with Groans of Frankenstein, adjacent dark fairy tale, and earned an Oscar for the respect and paid outsider in the shape of water. Alas, that once the empathetic approach feels less revolutionary in the Frankenstein, since most versions of Shelley's story feel for this beard, as opposed to his creator, played less like a scientist than a tortured artist by a long-haired Oscar Isaac. Karlov embodied him as a tragic figure, crouched by the lake with the little girl, near to the danger he poses after her. Now we get Jacob looking like an ammo jog or a wounded soldier, which is partly true as he is being reconstructed from the corpses of several. As El Toro says it, Frankenstein's painful creation has been cast where life cannot be killed, even bullets don't stop him, and must face the same existential crisis that confronts us all. No one asked to be burned, but once thrust into the world, we must each find our purpose. Early volumes of the Frankenstein featured a quotation from Johann Milton's Paradise Lost. Did I request a maker from my clay to mold me man? In this version, the blind old man encouraged the intellectually curious vision to seek wisdom from that same tomb. In principle, Del Toro has gone back to the book of his 2.5 hour magnum opus, which cost more than the Titanic and still looks like it was made for TV, as much as that pain me to say. Technically, Frankenstein was made for Netflix. and his streamer will give it whatever theatrical run is contractually obliged to honor the visual effect were not rented for big screen consumption. Alexander's Desplat broke score, on the other hand, make up for its grandeur. Rest assured that Del Toro remains a cinematic master, and every costume, set and prop was crafted with a formidable imagination and a daunting attention to detail. The dose element may be better suited to the consumption via double key coffee, table notebook, and Netflixes will undoubtedly release for its award push, as opposed to the fish's presentation afforded by the P10 large format camera. George as it may be, the entire film feels as if we are watching it through a people. Strangely, large and wide angle lenses make Frankenstein feel smaller, when the point was conceivably to squeeze more image into every time. Del Toro once entertained one notion of splitting the story into two movies, each told from a different perspective. First Frankenstein followed by his creation, revisionist version of event, but ultimately decided to present them one after the other. This made mid-movie end up tailors the stock of how articulate the vertebrate proves in Del Toro's telling. The creature could barely speak in the James original Universal's monster movie. In keeping with his shell-based novel, the movie opens in the Arctic with a ship trapped in ice. A monstrous figure pass by sled. Essay refers what audiences surely hold in their hands, dislodging from a pair, wrapped in rags. The man has a brilliant mind when it comes to be identifying the deeper theme he wants to explore. But it can sometimes feel simplistic when presented in his film. Unlike the Pinocchio, which dealt with the similar ideas of man creating life without the involvement of woman or anything approaching a human. Longer does not necessarily mean deeper. Once again, Del Toro shows an unflinching attitude to violence, thrusting our faces in with his scalpels and bone saws. The sound may actually be more traumatizing, but he is strangely stunted when it comes to be the depiction of his sexuality. That proves him independently comical in a scene where Isaac, as Victor Frankenstein sits in the top, shot from the nearly the same Angel Del Toro presented Bradley Cooper batting in the nightmare. Bubbles obscure the important part. Then the doctors stand up, and we may as well be watching Austin Power. As Del Toro blocked the scene using a random object to block his genital. Why is Del Toro so coy about his nudity in a film where the same character, Dr. Frankenstein, is shown graphically slicing away at cadavers a few minutes later? The same applied his study wrapped in a loincloth that effectively the status drag figure, who might otherwise the sexiest version we have seen since Andy Warhol's flash of Frankenstein. Is the monster still frightening if this poses no sexual threat? And what is the abstractly attraction future sister in La Elizabeth Mia feels toward him? If lust is unreachable, these don't seem to be the question that Del Toro has considered, while others, including the Shelley's central concern, should scientific ambition, Harvard for the unchecked experimentation that leads men to play God, seem of relatively little interest. Perhaps the face that is Jurassic Park, warning that just because man can does not mean the should, has been sufficiently directed in other horror movies. Why is so racked that done here? When Del Toro can explore different realms of psychology, such as scare that reporters lives on their son, and their wounds are visited on figure generation. The movie's most villainous character in nature Frankenstein, not his creation, but Victor's dominating that Colin play his more understanding mother, Claire whose premature demise, giving birth to his better William. may have inspired young Victor's experiment in conquering that. No one shows a more elegant fun reel than Del Toro. To the extent that his sight of Claire's faces in the casket became the single most impactful visual in a film with the countless to choose from. Meanwhile, her devastated young son comes across like a future serial killer, ultimately landing a pattern for his scheme in Waltz Harland and character who seeks this in Presley. The moment his brain might have overcome in handy, is he have found the abandoned water tower that serves as a Frankenstein's lab, modeled after a similar Victorian structure in New Romney, Kent, but made to appear even more modern worthy. The interiors are impressive. They may be too much so, to the point of the distraction. Exteriors are unconvincing, which undercut the illusion Del Toro is trying to achieve, such that the scene with the CG walls look too fake to be the upsetting. Frankenstein takes a turn toward the profound about it halfway through, when Eldon bursts into the ship and assumes the narration for the benefit of the Sandy Division captain. It's moving to hear him recount how he escaped a burning tower twisting free after his chain, a slave elevated to marvelous superhero. From the beginning, the creature displays extraordinary strength and the power to withstand gunfire. And yet, those very qualities make him feel more like Wolverine than a monster to modern eyes. Though centuries after Shelley's found a fictional cure of mortality, the species seem no closer to the reversing that. Dr. Frankenstein does not scream, is alive. Now I know what it feels like to be God. In Del Toro's telling the instead, we get characters who warm only monsters play God, and a creature who craves companionship faced with impossible task of living. Becoming a Frankenstein's evangelist was not on my 2025 bingo card. It started with my classic book club. Every year, we read a Gothic Tom to coincide with autumn, and our very first pick was Mary Shelley's classic tale. In the 3 years since, I have read it twice and am always amazed on how moved I am today. Del Toro's cinematic adaptations hits Netflix's, and what better way to show start my Friday morning than with a little bite of horror. Safe to say, my eyes are wide open. Sand coffee is all can say. Check up Elordi's better pick up a few of our decisions. As I have previously stated, I am much more of a reader than a watcher. So when I do turn to the screen, it's often because a pretty costume caught my eye. So first major kudos to the costume designer because everything was a Victorian feast for the eyes, vibrant, almost violent. Jewel tones and the Samson's gives made for some very captivating still. I have also unabashedly pinned almost every Mia God outfit to a Pinterest board. Okay, now onto real meat and potatoes, or should say honest. If you are not unfamiliar with the framework of the story, here is my book review for a quick refresher. Read that it came back. The film takes gross liberties from the original text, but in the cinematic context it worked well. Everything you think you know about it Frankenstein monster is going to be turned on its head. Ultimately, both the movie and the book are a story of this character and his creator. I was not a predecessor to like a Victor Frankenstein in the first place. The book pointed him as a mopey, nervous victim, but wow, Del Toro's adaptations made me hate him. Props to Oscar for animating with two-faced character who was never afraid to pretend goodness when it suited him, but was unhesitating in his cruelty. Watching the performances made me guilty, uncomfortable, not in a cringly wax, uncomfortable in a you are doing something morally disgusting and how can you live with yourself kind of way. Despite being human, Frankenstein denies humanity to his creation. Throughout the film, he don't. He tears, he abuses, help blame. Joe Monter put it to bear best so simple but pure. I almost tear. I am absence to you. But to myself, I simply am. Repeatedly, Frankenstein hides behind his own pride and God tries to protect his selfishness. While I am not one to condemn violence, even I felt to a bite of the vindication when a monster broke Frankenstein's nose. When pleasantly shocked me was the tenderness with which flowed renders Frankenstein's creature. Aside from the voiceover narration, the creatures speak very little unit about his secured second half of the film. Think of him as a baby learning to speak, because essentially that's what's happening. Elordi has non-facial expression and tone of voice. A way of moving his towering six from to feel like a charmed child that from the get-go. Del Toro's script did not an excellent job of exploring the humanity of the creature as he moves in the world, grappling with the love loneliness, rage even forgiveness the starkness between the man who was a monster and monster who was the real man is brought into full light in their final act. Frankenstein ever selfish, asks the monster to accord him final wish, the creature being the goodness that he is grant it willingly. Before the film ends with one of the most touching closing scenes, set in a hauntingly beautiful score by Alexandre Desplat. Frankenstein is a movie that, while so violent, it had me. At times overreaching my gaze, is also one that forces me to hope. If it does not scope up at least one award, I will, like the monster, be recklessly throwing some hand. When it comes to the foundation of sci-fi and horror, few stories loom as large as the Mary Shelley's Frankenstein or the modern Prometheus. It remains a spark left that continue to inspire wonder, terror, and sorrow in equal measure. Countless versions have retold the tale of a man who assembles life from the remains of the dead, but far fewer have truly adapted Shelley's classic. Can it bring us to his shot in 1994? But now Del Toro, a self-proclaimed Frankenstein's devotee, aims to bring this favorite story to life in a way that feels both definitive and deeply thought-provoking. Del Toro's Frankenstein captures everything special, tragic, and scary about the novel and delivers it in a way that is both quintessentially Del Toro and also proves there was only one man who could bring the story to life in the modern age. Through Oscar Isaac Victor Frankenstein, the lessons of the obsession and the facing consequences are brought to life in a brutal detail. While Jacob Elordi's role as a monster is a tale of pain and sadness that serves as a lesson in patience and tolerance. They are two parts of much larger story that does serve as a foundation for what is visually perfect, stuck in a distribution strategy that undermine the importance of what is presented for the world of film. When adapting a story that over 1,100 years old, it's hard to stand out among the array of existing adaptations and reinvention. Del Toro does his best to not necessarily retell the novel verbatim, but instead to capture the spirit and the iconography of the characters to them, while also bringing something new to a story that has been told as much that explanation is not necessary. To do this, first and foremost, Del Toro alters character from the novel into more archetypical version of themselves. For example, Elizabeth feels more like a sense of numerically that Victor struggled to attain. Baju is vanity, while it's nearly impossible. She is a character who exists both within and above the world, a figure of purity that no one in the film can match. Meanwhile, Victor Frankenstein is a walking example of what happens when obsession corrupts a person to do things they may not have expected. Compared to the book, these versions of the character feel more hyperbolized and where to make choices. They are significant departures from the source material. They still fit the spirit and they make the narrative even more compelling. To the effect, Del Toro's iterations for the monster is more tragic than ever, and it's hard to see him as a villain in any capacity. If any aspect of the film feels slightly forced, it's the plot point regarding Christopher Henry, who unfortunately feels more like a speed bump than an integral player in the Lord story, and takes away from an already rushed final. Frankenstein more than anything feels every bite Del Toro film, from Victor's lab to his nightmare of an angel of death. The film is filled with Del Toro's unique vision that feels more like an earthly fairy tale and than the real world. The film is dreamy from beginning to end, with moments of nightmarish reality showing that no matter how much Victor tries to normalize the idea of conquering a death, it's anything but ordinary. Yet for the old ways the film feels like the Del Toro. It also does not Frankenstein's aesthetic naturally fits Del so well that director vision disappear into the story, allowing it to breathe in the best way possible. Frankenstein can only go so far. This is a character film, true, and there are so many great performances that deserve praise. Starting with one other than Isaac's Victor Frankenstein, one of the most fascinating aspects of the character is how to he represent the idea of someone who is so obsessed with the journey that the destination can never match the expectation. Isaac masterfully showcases how his passion evolves into an obsession fueled by the loss of his mother as a child. Del Toro subtly weaves in the lasting impact of her death. Constantly, Isaac is often shown drinking milk, referencing the importance of mother's milk as a child, and the idea that the Frankensteins would also create life. Isaac sallies the pain, fear, and anger of a man who does not understand the gravity and importance of bringing life into the world, and is made that audiences can feast on for the entire runtime. The real star of the show, however, is Decker Flores as a monster. Not only does his Saltburn actor despair into the prosthetic and the creature effect, but he also moves like a newborn with the body acting akin to Del Toro's long-term colleague. The physical acting is only part of the performances, as Elordi captured the struggle of a being who does not understand what he is or why he is, and longs for acceptance and the companionship. To the monster's Frankenstein proves he is a stopped dead, but the monster also shows this stopping death does not mean that a person may not want it one day anyway. From the rappling voice of Elrodis, which mimics the many to depart, and soul that make him up, to his doll, his satyr, and his trend. It's hard not to celebrate the monster bought as a character, and is a tragic figure. Being intrigued by the final frame thanks to his performances would be understandable. The film belonged to Elodis and Isaac. There are plenty of other standout performances among the supporting cast. Goth's Elizabeth brings so much depth to the character, making her someone audiences can easily root for or even a favorite. Her intelligence, both in academia and emotion, is something to be admired, as even the monster does. God delivers a passionate but subtle performances. Harry Potter actor David Bradley is another standout in the small but vital role of the blind man who educates the monster. In short, Frankenstein has some of the best acting in 2025, and to the fact it's a shame many one won't see it on the big screen. When adapting classic stories of any sort, there's always a debate about which iteration feels like the most effective one. In the case of Frankenstein, Del Toro managed to blow a richer cut of water and command the story in a way that makes his version feel like the version to see it on the screen. So Victor Frankenstein's Odyssey see a man so scared of nature that he tried to control it. And yet, once he can't, he cannot understand or even desire what come of it. Entity monsters are being long-term for love and acceptance, with base human desire, and it can only find violence and hatred. The line from the book, I have loved in one of like a which you can secretly imagine and rage like a which you would not believe. If I cannot satisfy the one, I will inject the other. Permeate story and they are lesson to this blend on both sides and for the audiences. Frankenstein is a gothic tragedy and a powerful drama, yet from an entertainment perspective, there is a huge level of violent action and prosthetic effect that are bloody. Unsettling, Del Toro has been actively trying to make his version of the Frankenstein for about 20 to 25 years. Saying this is a film he has thought about, Del Toro has been mulling his project over for about 50 years, and his love of monster movies has been clear ever since his first film, 1992, Chronos. His love of Mary Shelley's novel has propped up in nearly all his work. From the gothic romance of the Crimson Peak to the closest he came to making a universal monster movie with the Hellboy franchise. Frankenstein has always been a part of Del Toro's work, and after an entire lifetime of dreaming about it, his passion project has finally been released. At the North American premiere of Frankenstein, Del Toro mentioned how long it took to get the film made the way he wanted it. And this is that vision. But when you consider just how long Del Toro has had this concept in his mind and how dedicated he has been to making this with his vision intact, one has to wonder how willing the writer and director is to alter his vision for the good for the film itself. Maybe something sounded great in his head for all those years, but it's not nearly as effective once it's on the screen. On one hand, it's fantastic that a director like Del Toro gets to make his dream come true, working at an epic level we have never seen him at before, to adapt his iconic story. But on the other hand, with questionable pacing and the desire to keep as much of the original story intact, albeit while still adding his own flair. Frankenstein shows that sometimes you have to kill your darling instead of reviving them. Del Toro's Frankenstein 2025 has been one of most anticipated films since its announcement. The Mexican filmmaker has long looked at monster with admiration, empathy, and love. You can track it through his work on comic book adaptations, gothic romance, fantasy, and more. The tender care that Toro shows his monster establishes an empathetic foundation for his audience to view other through. Frankenstein 2025 feels like a natural culmination of his love for monsters, where the shape of Victor is about love across any barrier. This film is more familiar, where these other stories distinctly told us to love the other for their differences. This story asks us to see ourselves. In his adaptations of Mary Shelley's landmark work, Del Toro opened his film in The Architect. Victor Frankenstein is wanted in the snow, a snarling mess of a monster rapping its way through the tundra and toward the ship and Gru who found him. It's here where Del Toro showcases earthy affection, with Jacob Elordi's creature tearing through the crew, cloaked in fun and his face mostly hidden by a hood. This is the creature at his most bestial. Once a monster is subdued, Victor is taken care of given the laudanum, and yet he begs to be left on the ice. He is begging to be abandoned for the creature to take and end the cycle of death. When the captain inquires about his story, Victor began to tell it the story of his childhood, his history and his creature, from it is the very beginning. Frankenstein 2025 is a look at the monster and remain like we have never seen before on the silver screen. The awareness of Shelley's story is alive in every choice that he makes while subtle. Notes to other adaptations also peek through. The costuming and producing design are decadent. The gowns they sewed, the cut of the band, every bite of Frankenstein has been curated to bring to life a period in time by evoking memories of it. Del Toro has curated every scene to pick at every memory. You have a Frankenstein as a story and as a visual language, relegating it to where it began while also leaving his own mark on his legacy. Additionally, the cast study Me Del Toro has assembled this brilliant together they push each other to be grander, louder, and more in tune with the world that the actor has created on the screen. While Oscar Isaac and Jacob Elordi powerfully command the film as its protagonist, Christoph Waltz all contribute to the tragedy of the story in their own unique ways. At Ascending Highlanders is a benefactor who has contracted Victor Frankenstein to complete his hypothesis, which he attempted to defend an academia, but was ostracized for. Highlander is rich and obsessed with stopping death and preserving life in every way that he can, including a reverse of the photography. As a Victor brother, he is loyal despite his fear of his brother. William Frankenstein hates Victor every call, is a woman of science, a lover of insects and freedom, and firmly pushes back against the violence of man and war, and then becoming an object of Victor's affection and obsession. As a film, there is a very little to find flaw in. However, as the film began to invest in the larger set pieces in an action sense, the high CGI quality began to meet the experience. The only issue with the Frankenstein is how harshly the CGI effect clashed against the beauty of the practical work in the film. A master of practical effect, it is even more garish given Del Toro's filmography. In fact, there are multiple moments throughout the movie that the film approach to a gothic architecture would have felt more alive and beautiful if produced in the same vein as Crimson Peak. Leaving the question was this his choice Del Toro, Netflix to make. Cleverly, the creature's own tail mimics that of his maker. From childlike wonder to villain, he undergoes the understanding that the violence he is subjected to from the world to his father is due to the simple act of existing. It's not that the creature is childlike that make him empathetic, but rather that he is being coming to the realization, no thought of his own, that he is to be the hated. The creator is stuck in a cycle of the violence, born into it, and then blamed for it, all while his father refuses to see how it all came to be. The creature may not be entirely human, but he is his father's son. Jacob's performances have, in the past, been propelled by his look Frankenstein. In turn, present him with a unique opportunity where have they cast him as the conduct of lust and romance, objectifying his body for audiences and characters Frankenstein allow him to be used his body. The work on Elordi is some of the most beautiful out here. The stitches running across the curvature of his muscle and the joint of his limb accentuate his body without sexualizing it, at least not with the same gaze we have seen him in before. Here, when intimacy and attraction are shown, is subtle and simple. It's a yearning to stop the loneliness, but an understanding just the same. And the thing of the sadness we see here is heartbreaking, and the need for partner is not about lust, but about finally not being alone. The creature is Alondi's best role yet, and showcases how much he can do when trusted to be more than a face. His movements are unsure and uncanny, and his innocence is highlighted in all of this. The way Elrodis control his body and his expressions changes as he grows, until his humanity starts to be take shape, as if molded out of a second time. Del Toro is not one of the subtitle. Why present the subtext when you can behold in your decision? And that is no different in Frankenstein 2025. Yes, there are layers to see each scene. However, through color and framing, his story present a map in the emerald and scarlet. Frankenstein is a dual protagonist narrative. The film moves between the two of them, recentering the focus as we view a new part in the cycle. Both men are unpacking their trauma with no understanding of what they have handed down or what they have received. Violence begets violence, and the age of perfection perpetuates it. For a storytelling perspective, Del Toro highlights a concept that he has long worked into many of his films. However, as his directorial gaze shifts, he points out the monsters that even humans become. He asks us to empathize with their creator and their creation, and to understand our place among them, not because they are innocent, but because both evolve. The hunter and the sheep all exist as they are, and a violent world critically arrives to them all. In many of the moments when we see the cycle from father to son damage the next generation of Frankenstein, it's hard not to see a life that many men in my life have gone through. And given both Isaac and Del Toro's cultural background, a story about it and fatherhood takes on a separate lens from those who grew up in the landed household. There is no absolution in Del Toro's Frankenstein, but it is an understanding. Trauma breaks us and the search for perfection, rejecting the fingerprint it leaves, only makes it a borrowed deeper. If not for the choices made during the CGI, sequences with Frankenstein would stand out beautifully in Del Toro's filmography. Still, it showcases why the auteur is the of monsters. Del Toro has taken Victor Frankenstein from mad scientist back to the tortured soul, and horror is better for it. Young Australian star Jacob Elordi is one of the most disarming aspects of the Del Toro's board, visually stunning but frequently jarring the work of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. The Mexican director has chosen to emphasize the romanticism at the expense of the horror. Elordi plays a creature as a misunderstood James in like outsider with the audible issues rather than as an agent of evil, and shows even if his face and torso are latticed with the suitably scared staples and stitches. He is not only the most sympathetic character in the movie, but he the best looking one too. It's left to Oscar Isaac to provide the real villainy as a brilliant but egomaniacal scientist Victor Frankenstein, who fathers the monster but then promptly disown him. Audiences are already so steeped in Frankenstein myth that it's doubtful they can watch this film with innocent eyes. They have had the Universal's movie, Young Frankenstein, the hammer, arrows, canned, blunt, stab the material, poor things, and even Andy Wald's Frankenstein. This may will be a far more faithful interpretation of the novel that most of his predecessor, but that does not mean it can exercise their memory. His performances is a mannered and uneven. The film could Baron and you half expect the actor to portray Victor as a dashing and poetic figure. Instead, in the scene when Victor is the scientist, scandalizing the medical establishment with his galvanic experiment, he is strangely sinister as he rolls his eyeball, fidget and jump around. It's very hard to much sympathy for him. His arc registered much more strongly after Broadno, when he is playing Victor as a broken and despairing man with a prosthetic leg. On his grave, architect tries to destroy his creation. Far contemporary director can match Del Toro's visual. Few contemporary director can match Del Toro's visual flair on his imagination. His film is full of brilliantly stacked set pieces. It opens in wide and rousing fashion as Danish explore discover the badly wanted Victor and bring him aboard their ship. Soon the monster turns up too. The sailor do everything they can to wipe him out, but he keeps on coming back, like a stain that can never be removed. In terms of craft, there is much to be admired here. Whether it's the battlefield where Victor goes in search of body part, or the muddy, blood-spattered public hanging are still held. Every location is lovingly detailed. Costume and production design are impeccable. Adapted to their best to Christopher bring his family. Sorry to be the poet at the beginning, but I really did not care much of Del Toro's personal revamp Frankenstein for streamer Netflix at all. This is not your mama's Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, with the director making the wholesale changes to just about every aspect of the text so that only a handful of names and setting for the book remain. In some ways, it's admirable that Del Toro aimed to navigate his way through such a beloved text by substituting his own scene and ideas into the narrative. But as over 2.5 hours of such innovation, it becomes apparent that most, if not all, of his retell his classic story in a way that is just not as good as the original book. You are the monster Frankenstein is told at the end, and the clicking back to the usual ground body glitches is what the 2025 version of Frankenstein finally washes up. This is a Netflix's movie, not a real film. So just about everything is green screen CGI, starting with the architect, where the sea offering shape to the horizon is locked in place by ice while the crews rescue the Baron from his fearsome, deadly monsters with a ticking clock before the undying monster can return. The Baron and then his loquacious monster unfold their backstory. From the Baron's daddy issue with his Creole father to his friendship with an arms dealer, headlanders, a part-time pornographer who provides fresh corpses for experiment from the ongoing slaughter of war, and even the Baron's mixed brothers, Darren's very precious. Elizabeth, even in a boho place like the Edinburgh, the Baron's radical plan to reanimate corpses cast disdain and outrage. So he head out to a gigantic castle with an elbow-ready wormhole drainage system where he create his monster, then reject it and then attempt to destroy it in a rather half-hearted way that allowed you to escape and get revenge on him. No one can conquer that. Is a stern warning that if Frankenstein does not hit, the overall arc is no different to other versions, but the director aimed to change almost every note. Del Toro never saw a luminous dress, towering CGI, edifs or a pet butterfly. He did not like. Some of the ornate touches are amusing. One night with the Venice, a lifetime with Mercury, Highlander quips after skipping nimbly over a pool of blood in a street. French porcelain claimed to man's dream. He exults as he relieves himself in a pot. Highlander is a more precisely drawn character than condensed milk Gisela Frankenstein. Only monsters play God is the parental takeaway, but this arc's waspish. Obsessive creature is not easy to empathize with, nor is the Elordi's rather boring gut and paste monster. Glowering from his chain perched in the depth of the Frankenstein's castle. There is quote from the Baron Milton. One genuine mystery that he is a white Del Toro, who presumably loves cinema, is happy to create his own Frankenstein monster for Netflix, who are a mission to complete against and destroy the very thing he loves so much. Choice is the one thing that God has granted us, Elizabeth says, but Del Toro has a choice who is a work with, and it's hard to see that his florid style is helped by the road Netflix's house style here of the transparently faked backdrop and the ridiculous, airless vistas that make up computer generation. Yes, the writer director bring the changes to the next text, but nothing is better than the before. What differences does it make that Highlanders want to have his mind transported to the monster? Or that Frankenstein blame he monster for his friend's murder? Or why Butter gives Frankenstein is a prosthetic leg and never mentioning it again? And yet all glitches are intact. The monster learns to speak ridiculously easily from the usual blind hermit, and even after Frankenstein watches his creation bent iron bar, leaves him locked up in puny iron that don't hold him for a minute. Similarly, Del Toro's construct an extra scene in which Frankenstein easily pulled the plug on his early creation, which makes his reluctance to kill his creation hard to understand, and emphasizes on dead animal, horses, wolves, and corpses. Repel the eye, Dala call back to other version. Secretly, I was a teenage Frankenstein, Archer's distraction, and Frankenstein's final decision to kill the monster. His son feels completely unarmed given their lack of contact. Del Toro's scattershot approach to the adapting the classic story just does not run out to reanimate Frankenstein of his miserable looking monster, whose spoiler alert turns out to be the goatee in the end. An Elephant Chan 152-minute film that gives him to most of an idea. Del Toro's Frankenstein is an undisciplined, self-regarding take on a great story that does not need such extraneous bell and whistle to capture the imagination. The most romantic relationship in Del Toro's Frankenstein is not between Victor Frankenstein and his beloved Elizabeth, reimagined here from childhood friend to his brother's fiancée, nor it is between the Elizabeth and the creature. Even she says he is beautiful so, not the most tender bond in the film is between Del Toro and the monster. Del Toro's long-seeming adaptation, he has been talking about it in the various capacities for at least 20 years. Foreground the religious allegory in Mary Shelley's novel, as well as the creature's extensional torment. Some of the Doctor's creation can be quiet, but Elordi is full of worry, endowed with supernatural strength and the healing ability, more suggestive of a superhero than a walking corpse. He roars like a dragon as he rages across the permafrost searching for his creator. Despite this, he is the career hero of the base. Agri's figure, the table open, which he is resurrected in the shape of cross who come back from the dead, kill his god. Like Shelley's novel, Del Toro's Frankenstein open in the Arctic, where a crew of sailors led by Captain Anderson bear witness to a violent confrontation once a catcher catch up to Frankenstein. Both sides of this satisfactional Federson due to then tell the stories inside the warm, confined the captain's quarter, 86 while Elordi had skimmed the rough heaven wooden ceiling. The film is thus split into two. Victor's tale is full of the engaged this time directed at his biological father's Leopold, a strict and demanding surgeon who young Victor blames for the death of his mother. This is one of the less subtle choices that Toro makes, but it's nothing compared to the moment later on. John Victor's younger brother William shot over the real monster at his moody elder sibling. Yet high-minded dialogue about gods and monsters arrives in Frankenstein, much of it delivered by Isaac as the arrogant young doctor who truly believes that he can improve on nature's flawed design. God is inept, and we must correct his mistakes. He cries shortly before being expelled from Edinburgh Medical School, where his story really began. Del Toro's completely reimagined the portion of Shelley's novel where Dr. Frankenstein actually can cure that, adding a new character. The deep-pocketed industrialist who come to the Frankenstein with an offer of unlimited funding if he will allow Highlander to document his process. Highlander also has access to a lot of dead body, which began to pile up in the catacomb-like basement of the imposing stone tower where Dr. Frankenstein does this work. There is some mumbling about shame and the lymphatic system, but the real purpose of the lab scene is for Del Toro's to recreate a morbid aesthetic of a 19th century anatomical drawing. This is fair enough as the science is all made up anyway, and there is glistening, bloodless beauty to the grey corpses posed like the sculpture made of rotting flesh, their skin peeled black to expose their brain and spinal column and fastened with wires in the intricate pattern. This ego-delasing that crawls up the spine of Elizabeth grown, one of many symptoms, detailed indica swimming and progressing design. Visually, Frankenstein's plays like Del Toro's greatest hit, The Flocked Velvet and a Crumbling Stone. Mary Shelley's Gothic novel has lent itself to a number of on-screen interpretations from the screenplay James. Mary Shelley's Gothic novel has lent itself to a number of on-screen interpretations from the creepy James to the hilarious Mel Brooks 1974 classic Young to the unintentionally hilarious Kenneth Branagh's 1994 Fargo Mary Shelley's as well as inspiring countless. Dramatic rave, Del Toro joins C. Frankenstein somewhere near the top of the pile with a messy but gloriously whistled melodrama. We understand that its a core Frankenstein is a cautionary tale about awful parenting with Vector, tale about the awful parenting with Vector cast as a catastrophically useless father. All of his energies are focused on bringing him with the creature into the world, leaving him with very little gas left in the tank when it comes to actually nurturing or caring for the living being he has created. That all goes to the film's main female character, who perceives the creature as scientist and the word of love. But before we get to that, there is a creation scene, which is the story equivalent of Hamlet to be or not to be. So likely the moment by which each version of Frankenstein will be judged. And surprisingly Del Toro, a director with a back catalogue that include the Chrono and the Davis Backbone 2001, does not shake the responsibility of delivering a memorably binary bird scene. The preview sees Victor harvesting bodies by the dozen from a battlefield strewn with fresh corpses. There follow a gruesome anatomical mix, as likely looking parts are plucked from torsos, suitable eyeballs slaughtered merely into sockets, tendons and is never knitted together, and lamb sword Mechanically from their erstwhile owner. You can hear the joint popping and cracking and practically smell the bone marrow. And there is a grand switching on still to come. It is impossible to imagine how the section could feel any more electrifying than the surgical preparation. But understand and admire Del Toro's showmanship at your palm without overshading. Let's just say he delivered. For all the sheerness of its practical effect, the film does not shy away from using CGI to augment the huge set. Victor's workshop is closer to the set of a lavish opera than the traditional laboratory depicted in other films' version. There is logic to all his satire drag beyond the snarky impact. However, the underlines and the tension built by the violence of a creation offset unexpectedly turn the scene ahead. The creature first moment with his creator play like any broad father meeting his infant son for the first time. Victor is touched and elated, proud and happy.